Chris, let's start with a really fundamental question. How are you using AI, data, all of these technology capabilities to drive creative decision making?
Wonderful question. And it's a really important one because sometimes we think that AI is going to replace the human involvement in creativity, or everything is going to be data-based and optimizing on the wrong metric. Well, the good news is that data and AI can enhance the creative process, and it does it in several ways. The first is it allows us to test more things more quickly. So in the old world, we'd have to develop concepts and test them and wait for responses. And the whole process was quite laborious. Now we can stand up simulations using synthetic personas to understand how messaging connects, how likely formats are going to engage with customers. And we're able to model real life scenarios much better with AI-driven technology, which helps us get to a better quality output and also get to that quicker. The other really critical thing is that we're very passionate about keeping the human in the loop of creativity. And yes, I could use ChatGPT to help me create an advertising campaign today, but what it really needs is a creative director who can examine the outputs, who can make sure it connects with strategy, to make sure that the style and tone guide of the brand is being pulled through and that we're making the right choices with customer placements and where the ads are produced. And technology can take us some way down that line and help us be a bit faster, but we need the human to make the decisions. We need the human with the craft marketing skills who can make the right choices and edit the content into something more beautiful and impactful. So the way that we're using technology is multifaceted. Yes, we use it to speed up the way we do things. And yes, we can do it to produce creative at a lower cost, but we can't do it without having the human in the loop. And that's the most critical part of our methodology, is having skilled, trained professionals who know great artwork and know great creativity and can train the tools in our teams to be able to deliver that.
There's no longer an excuse to not be data-driven. I think the evolution of insights and information, frankly, is pretty astounding. And even if you just look back the last 10 years ago, how you would get data and how would you make a data-driven decision, you would have to reach out to IT, get somebody to write a SQL query, get somebody to export that SQL query, send it to you in some sort of structured or partially structured format. You would need a data analyst to parse that. You would need somebody to extract the salient points from it and the insights from it. They would need to then ship that to you, hope that it meets your decision-making needs, and then you would make that decision. By the time that gets to you, you've already made the decision, and there's that lag period that creates a significant gap. Fast forward now to today, you no longer have to write SQL code because there's text to SQL capabilities with large language models, and the ability to unsurface insights directly connected to the decision you're trying to make are more available, readily available than ever. We often create capabilities around AI for BI, and how are we embedding generative AI, LLM chatbot interfaces into our reporting functionality to bring our creatives closer to the insights so that they can really embed that into their day-to-day decision making.
How is this method that you're talking about, using data analytics, AI, how is this all changing how your clients are working with and or reaching their target audience?
So data is allowing us to get to people quicker. It's allowing us to reach people at a bigger scale, and it's allowing us to do it with higher quality, more relevant advertising. And that's the magic formula. So the technology is allowing us to identify people and reach them through digital channels and connected experiences in a way that we couldn't do because the data wasn't flowing properly a few years ago. Now it is flowing correctly, so we're able to identify those people. The next job is to deliver the right messaging to people. And that's where AI has really helped us a lot, because it allows us to ask synthetic personas questions. It allows us to identify more themes within market research and test more of those. So we're able to shape higher quality campaigns with more relevant content. And then the final piece it allows us to do is to reach those people at scale through more efficient media. And that efficiency is delivered through using technology to understand the relative effectiveness of different placements and also automate how we buy and place that advertising. So technology is playing a wonderful role in helping us to reach people with better quality content faster and in channels that really matter to them.
I think simply put, to be able to reach your patients, let's say, you have to be able to identify them first. And especially in pharma and particularly in rare disease areas, that can be increasingly difficult to do. What AI and a holistic view of the data landscape enables us to do is to make sure that we're using all of the both structured and unstructured information that we have at our disposal to do that. And I'll give you a really novel example that we're working on right now. There is a biotech who is releasing a type 1 diabetes asset. It's currently in phase 3 of the clinical trials, and it has a very small population of about 60,000 people across the US and EU. They've had a very difficult time identifying who those patients are through claims data alone. Around 5% are they're able to identify. Well, if you can only identify 5% of that population, and you're building effectively a rare disease product that needs to get paid for by payers, it's very difficult to build that value dossier or that value perspective for the insurance providers. They came to us with this issue and said, hey, we have this great asset. It's going to save a lot of lives, but we can't seem to identify the patients, which is going to make it difficult for us to launch effectively. What we did is we looked at an entire landscape of different data sources in the market, and two in particular surfaced to the top. One was unstructured electronic health record notes, and the other was continuous glucose monitoring information. And with the electronic health record notes, we're using large language models to perform natural language processing on the unstructured text to then identify if that patient qualifies for the severe type 1 diabetic case or patient that we're looking for. In this case, it's 2 or more severe hypoglycemic events. We're also combining that with the continuous glucose monitoring data that we've partnered with a device manufacturer to collect, and incorporating that into our patient identification model as well. Early signs indicate that we'll get well above 20 to 25% patient identification, which will again help us understand who those patients are, will help us then build a commercial strategy as well as a payer strategy to get those insurance providers to cover that expensive medication, and it will allow us to then execute that commercial strategy much more effectively.
The other really interesting dynamic here is understanding who owns the data, who is the one making decisions, and where does that capability sit. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about evolutions in the marketplace as a result of AI and data, we can certainly see the challenges of the operating model. Can we have more of these capabilities in-house so that we have the creatives as part of our brand teams? Have we got people who can understand the data and make data science-based decisions on the data? How do we get them in our marketing team? What's the role of our agency? Are they going to be producing all of our content, or can they focus on one specific type of content? So it's created a lot of conversation that we love solving these challenges with our clients.
Yeah, it brings up an interesting concept of how generative AI has brought insights off of kind of the static PowerPoint deck. We've been doing analytics and analysis and data work, or, our entire existence. But what it looked like 3 years ago looks very different in terms of the output of what it looks like today. I'll give you an example. In terms of customer segmentation, if we're going to look at behavioral data and try to perform a basic customer segmentation model to identify unique cohorts within that entire population that we can then go execute personalized, relevant marketing campaigns to, we may run a data science model. We may then build persona slides that we read out to the marketing organization. They may consume that information, and our hope is that when they go make their next marketing decision, they have that deck with them, and they say, this patient has this unique characteristic, and therefore I'm going to tailor my campaign this way. What we found is many times those decks would sit on the shelf and they wouldn't get used. Now we have the ability with generative AI to create things like synthetic personas, where we create those persona readouts, but then we're creating truly digital representations of those customers that our marketers can then directly interface with as they're making their decisions. We can feel confident that the data is then making its way into their decision-making process, and they can feel confident that they don't have to dust off a PowerPoint every single time that they are looking to make a marketing decision.
So when we're talking about AI and it becoming embedded in everything that you're doing, whether it's marketing operations, and using these technologies, how are the roles and the responsibilities and the accountability models changing across your work with internal as well as external agency partners?
As the data and AI lead at Accenture, when generative AI came out, a lot of the organization and enterprises looked directly to the data and AI function, and rightfully so. It has it in its name, but I'll say AI and the context with which it's said has changed significantly and drastically in the last couple of years. I actually believe that while the data and AI specialists are instrumental in building the strategy, generative AI is actually an enterprise-wide imperative. Everybody needs to be upskilling in generative AI. Everybody needs to be defining the effective use cases. And there needs to be a central point within the organization at the CEO level that prioritizes which ones to scale and which ones to sunset. I think the shortcomings that we see in really embedding it into the organization is when you let every organization kind of develop their own strategy, and we call it these 1,000 flowers blooming, where everyone has a small use case, but there's no central governing principle that helps you identify which one can be scaled. We've all seen the MIT report that says 95% of these generative AI experiments are failing. Typically what we see because of that is because there's not a clear measurement protocol as to what success actually looks like and what needs to scale. And a lot of these experiments are being run in kind of individual departments as opposed to a holistic view across the organization. So I just think that generative AI is so ubiquitous in everything that we do now today. It needs to be the imperative of everybody to upskill in it. And it also requires a lot of change management and a lot of process design.
So with our clients at the moment, we're seeing a huge amount of focus in building some really strong fundamentals in how everybody should be using AI, whether that's generative AI or using it on a project management basis. There's a core set of interdisciplinary skills that AI enables that everybody should have at their fingertips. And we're seeing clients build enterprise skills across many industries, including life science at the moment. Where the differentiating factor is going to come from is how individual functions then build their accelerators on top of that, because marketing can and should use enterprise tools. But there's also going to be moments where it needs special tools to understand more about their customers and to be able to unleash creativity in a way that a generic tool won't allow them to do. Now, the magic comes is when organizations are working as portfolios or joined up marketing teams to spot what those solutions are and build them at scale, rather than go to individual tech providers or agencies for individual brand needs. Because these are all going to feed off a common data set. And we need to make sure that that data set stays centralized, and that regardless of whether it's an enterprise tool or a function level tool, that they're all drawing down from the same data and providing benefit back to the organization.
I think it's also necessary to distinguish between moonshot use cases with AI and quick win efficiency use cases with AI. You know, we're all consumers of AI for the most part. I think the last thing I saw was OpenAI. The monthly active users is about 10% of the world's population, and that's only in a short time frame of about 3 years since it's launched. We're all consumers of it in our personal lives. I think we actually need to adopt many of those characteristics in our professional lives as well, in terms of experimenting with it and identifying small efficiencies. And as those small efficiencies build, it creates really impactful outcomes, versus everyone trying to pivot to the moonshot opportunity, which says we're going to completely reinvent how CRMs are created, or we're going to completely reinvent how from the ground up a process is executed. I think those are important to look at, and those will ultimately come. But I also think it shouldn't take away from the smaller individual efficiencies that can be gained on a daily basis.
Now, after everything that we've discussed today and how artificial intelligence, data, analytics is changing how marketers, agencies, clients collaborate together, I want to pose the question to both of you and telling me where you think we're headed and what excites you most about the potential of using this technology, both in making the creative decisions and helping those decisions that improve outcomes for your clients.
Yeah, for me, the big exciting opportunity is for more patients to get more access to the treatments that they need more quickly. And that's the promise of what marketing can bring here. We can make it more affordable, by stripping out cost from our processes. We can make it more compelling by having the technology develop more relevant campaigns than have ever been created before. And what I would most love is if when we get to the annual awards at the end of the marketing season, for pharma organizations to win the big awards, not win the side room pharma awards, but for the creativity to be at par with other industries, for the impact to be felt in the same way that it is in other industries, and for everyone to be proud about pharmaceutical marketing, because it's an incredible thing that pharma marketers do. And technology can help us to do that at an elevated scale and quality. And that's really compelling.
I think what I'm most excited about is how new channels are going to emerge for overall customer experience. I think the chat interface with large language models is just the beginning of a new customer experience paradigm. And I think what that means for our people is creativity is as important as ever, because these large language models have been trained on the existing corpus of information and data, and creatives, and I mean creative storytelling, creative decisioning, creative concepting, not the asset of creative development, are going to be more important than ever to make sure that when the model wants to turn left, we turn right, and we can create something truly net new in relationship with the large language models. So I think I'm most compelled by the new channels that are going to emerge and how that's ultimately, to Chris's point, going to drive better customer experiences and in the pharma industry, better patient outcomes.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. It was a really interesting discussion. Chris, Will, thank you.
Thanks for having us.